Are live.
All right, welcome to the House Judiciary Committee this Thursday morning, May 22nd. And we're going to take a look at an aspect of a bill that we looked at a little earlier this session, H223. Two of the sections of that bill, sections 1 and 3, were moved into H222, which we should finally have it on its way to the governor tomorrow. But there are two sections left, section 2 and 4. And if you can just describe very quickly what those are, and then we'll go to Annie for some testimony.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. I'm trying to remember what section 4 is all about, but the main point of this bill, or the main goal, is to tackle the issue of which our witnesses will speak to very well, better than I, but the issue of automobile manufacturers refusing or not making it simple for victims of domestic violence to basically disable the tracking feature. Say on, how if you have a connected vehicle, you have an app on your phone that can, you know where your car is, and victims of domestic violence it's another way to continue to abuse and track and stalk victims. And it's been difficult for some victims to get the automobile manufacturers to just disable the tracking feature for the abuser. And a number of states have already passed similar bills, and as Andrea will tell us, this is something that a number of automobile manufacturers have already done, and it's so the argument that it's not possible is really not accurate. That's the point of section 2. And then what was 4? I think that was, was there a section 4? Oh, so yeah.
That's
so
the heart of it.
yeah, that's the main thing. Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
All right. So over to you, Annie, if you could introduce yourself and continue.
Great. Good morning, esteemed members. Thanks for the opportunity to provide testimony on this critical issue. My name is Annie Seifela. I am a private attorney based in Brooklyn, New York. I'm a survivor of technology facilitated abuse, and sometimes we call it tech abuse, which is just shorthand for any time tech is used to facilitate the ongoing abuse or targeting of a victim or survivor of domestic violence or intimate partner violence. And I'm also the co-chair of the New York Cyber Abuse Task Force, which is a volunteer coalition of attorneys and professionals who are dedicated to addressing tech abuse through advocacy and legislative reform. So we collaborate with lawmakers and tech companies and law enforcement to design strategies that protect people who are targets of the misuse of technology in the context of intimate partner violence. And you might be wondering why someone from New York is here to talk so passionately about a Vermont law, but I have a deep affection for Vermont. I spend summers and winters there. But more importantly, the task force we're running in New York has long advocated for these types for tech abuse to be addressed through state law. That's because state laws are uniquely situated to respond quickly and effectively in victims in their home communities, where they're more likely to know the support agencies, where they're more likely to know their local law enforcement or other decision makers who can help them get safety much more quickly than relying on federal efforts. And I think at the moment, it's safe to say we're not going to be able to rely on the federal government to protect consumers. So I just want to say that as why H223 is so important, and this provision specifically. As an advocate, my focus is on protecting victims of domestic violence, as I said. One of the most insidious forms of tech abuse is cyber stalking. When Apple, you may remember, introduced AirTags to the market for the first time, our task force was among the first to raise alarms and require Apple to come and meet with us. And we spoke with the trust and safety team about the potential misuse of this technology by stalkers. So the issues involving vehicles are not new. It's just this has just been sort of a gradually progressing tech. And while Apple has since implemented guardrails, these measures are not foolproof. If there's one thing my advocacy has taught me and was mentioned by the person who introduced me, we can't rely on big tech or on companies to keep us safe. We have to fill in those gaps and oftentimes pass laws that call them to the carpet when they make excuses such as we simply cannot disconnect a car. So I'm going to leave the highly technical aspects of connected cars to my colleague, Andrea Amico, who's here. He is truly the national, probably world expert on that issue. But I will note that I want to say something about Vermont's proposed bill, that I think some of the language is commendably designed in that it doesn't require victims of abuse to first obtain an order of protection or restraining order before they qualify for car disconnection. In New York, we fought hard to ensure that the New York bill that was recently passed had similar language, and allowing for the broader approach as is outlined in the proposed bill is a really good first step to ensuring that more victims can make use of the relief provided. And I think probably there may be some folks who are pushing back against this bill, asking why do you need more laws, as in already addressed in the cyber stalking law or in the stalking laws. And so I want to emphasize a few facts that make H223, this final provision of H223, particularly important. One pervasive myth I encounter on the subject of tech abuse is the idea that if someone is the target, they can simply go offline to escape harm. But this really misunderstands the nature of modern stalking. Cyber stalking often blurs the lines between digital and physical realms, using everyday devices like vehicles, also phones, also the appliances in our homes, pretty much everything, our watches, to track and surveil victims. It's not merely an online problem, it's a life problem with severe consequences for safety, autonomy, and mental health. And the stakes could not be higher. I want to emphasize this. Persistent stalking, whether in person or via technology, is one of the most significant lethality factors in intimate partner violence. Studies show that victims of persistent stalking face a dramatically heightened risk of physical harm, including death, when they attempt to evade the person who is stalking them persistently. It is imperative that we view this type of stalking as serious and potentially deadly. We also should address, hopefully through comprehensive consent education in our public schools, the cultural normalization of constant surveillance in relationships. Many young people today see sharing passwords and locations or access to personal devices as acts of love and trust. While these behaviors may seem innocuous, they pave the way for abuse. We've become so accustomed to trading privacy for convenience that we often overlook the dangers of this hyper-connected world. Like many of you, I believe strongly in the right to privacy, the right to be left alone. While consumers may willingly exchange some privacy for the convenience of modern technology, it becomes a grave issue when that privacy is weaponized. Laws like H223 are essential to putting guardrails around these abuses, ensuring that people of Vermont are protected from the unique threats posed by vehicle tech. Thank you so much for the committee for taking the time on this vital issue, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? We're all pondering our questions. Yeah, Angela, go ahead.
I can stick around too, no pressure.
Well, yeah, actually, if I have a question, Andy, but I think I'll hold it until after we hear from Andrea. Thank you.
All right, over to Andrea, if you could introduce yourself and proceed. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me here. I'm so grateful that you are giving me the time. I think that this law is a landmark law. It closes a very important loophole that today exists in too many anti-stalking laws. It recognizes the fact that unfortunately technology in cars is increasingly being exploited to perpetrate a series of crimes: home invasions, theft, stalking. That's the topic of today. My name is Andrea Amico. I created a company called Privacy for Cars. We have a simple mission. It's called the driving privacy. And that really means that I do three things. One, we develop software for businesses who want to protect their customers and their employees. I work with a lot of fleets. I don't know if you realize this, but a lot of people who have their car repossessed in Vermont, we work with their banks to ensure that not only they don't, they already lost their cars, they shouldn't lose their identity. So we have protected data in the cars. We also work with dealerships, none of them in Vermont. Hopefully it's going to change soon. The second important thing that I do is that we will invest an enormous amount of revenue to build free tools for consumers. This was a passion project before being a business. It will always be this way. For instance, we created the very first free tools for consumers to understand what technology is in their cars, what data is being collected, where it's going, what apps are compatible with it. We'll get back to this topic. Over 700,000 consumers used it, over 1,000 in Vermont. And by the way, we take cases from them for free to try to improve their privacy. The third thing that I do is I do a lot of research. I'm a very curious person, or as I've been told by many industry members, I like to stick my nose where it doesn't belong. And I thoroughly enjoy doing that. And then I tell everybody about what I find out. I tell industry associations, and then I tell consumer groups, and then I work with a lot of groups that specifically work on domestic abuse. And increasingly, I'm starting to talk with folks like you who actually have the power to do something about it, and I hope that you will. The last 10 years have really been a boon for stalkers. Back in the day, if you wanted to stalk somebody to their cars, you had to go through a lot of trouble. You had to buy an aftermarket device. It costed hundreds of dollars. You had to find somebody who would go and install it. It would have to be a friendly mechanic sometimes. And then typically you would be stuck with a bill month by month because you would have to pay the monthly fees to keep that device alive. As Annie pointed out, eventually this changed when Bluetooth trackers became common. And so the weapon of choice became slipping a tile, an AirTag, Eddystone, one of those little things that connect to the phones of people nearby, and then ping the owner of that device about where that device is. They were cheap, again, easy to hide. But the real game changer has been when car manufacturers decided it was a great idea to put the telematics into every car. That means that every car has a phone number and a data plan. And not only the manufacturer can remote into your car, but just about anybody else. And so cars start to have mobile apps. And that has been fantastic for stalkers and horrible for victims for a number of reasons. One is essentially free. Within a matter of seconds, you can download the app, you can tether it to the car, and then you have established an electronic leash on that vehicle. Two, it's essentially instantaneous and continuous monitoring. Three, it's stealth. I am not aware of a single vehicle in circulation where it's clearly obvious to a driver that somebody else may be watching them. Fourth, and this is very important, it's bidirectional. Not only you know where the car is, you can do things with the car at a distance. It started with you can unlock and start the car, and then it became you can honk the horn, and nowadays is you can turn on and turn off features. You can make the car scorching hot in the summer, freezing cold in the winter. You can change the suspension settings so that survivors are physically harmed. You can look at them through the cameras inside and outside of the vehicle. And most importantly, create a massive legal loophole that is a great protection for the stalkers, not for the victims. Because most of the state laws that have stalking provisions say that in order to stalk somebody, you need to install a device. And in fact, there are court cases that have been lost by survivors nationwide because the abusers and the manufacturer often are thrown into these lawsuits argue, well, hold on a second, nobody installed anything. This thing came out of the factory, and your law says that you need to install something physical, otherwise it's not stalking. And stalking is stalking. It doesn't matter if you put a device in it or not. And it's honestly, it's disgusting. If you wanna lose your sleep, I highly encourage you to go and find the first docket of a case in California. where an abuser used the Tesla app, and the kind of things that actually are perpetrated by this person are absolutely disgusting. And the case was thrown out in court because California has exactly one of those provisions. And your law, fortunately, closes this loophole. So thank you for considering passing this law. I want to add something here. I started, doing research almost more than a decade ago in privacy in vehicles. I taught my daughters how easy it was to hack into the infotainment system of mom's car to read the text messages. I disclosed the response to manufacturers back in 2017. They estimated that over 100 million cars were vulnerable. They still are, by the way. And then when I finished that disclosure with over 20 different brands, apps started to come up. And so I thought, that's interesting. Let me look into that. And in 2018, I rented a car from Enterprise. It was a Ford vehicle. And I downloaded the Ford app. And boom, in 30 seconds, I am connected. And then I returned the car and I watched what happened. And for months, I could see where the rental car was going. At any point, I could have started, unlocked it, and taken it. We nicknamed those the forever rentals. By the way, it still works today. It still works today. And when I went to Enterprise and I sent them a notification multiple times and never got a response, and I went to Ford. And Ford actually, fortunately, listened. I talked to their connected team. They understood immediately this was a problem. And so we started thinking about how do we fix this? And so Ford and I came up with a protocol that we nicknamed the disconnect by reset. It's very simple. It's a few lines of code that literally can save somebody's life. And what it does is that when somebody's in a car, all they need to do is to do a factory reset. This deletes the data in the car, including the authentication key of the mobile phone. Essentially, the car sends a signal back to Ford. And Ford says, vehicle 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 was reset. Who is connected to this car? Boom, they're booted out. Instantly. No documentation, no filings of documents, just instant. And Ford implemented it eventually over the years. So Ford means Ford and Lincoln, of course. Over the years, BMW, Toyota, Lexus, and Volkswagen implemented it. I have no idea why nobody else has. And of course, while I was working with Ford, I started to do the same. I started to rent a bunch of other cars. I went to car shows. I started to honk the horns at car shows and conferences and showing to people how easy it was to do this. And I presented this to the Auto ISAC, which is the association of, it's a group of manufacturers getting together to discuss security faults. And at the peak of my research, I had over 20 cars across the country I could remotely control, including a police cruiser, by the way. And when I did that, I was told it was not a hack because I had not written any code. I was just exploiting a feature that I put at the factory. And so the situation, again, this happened in 2018. So now 7 years later, I'm here in this room asking you to actually consider to pass this law because it's time to close this loophole. And in fact, my worry is that the law does not go far enough in 3 areas. One of the key things that we hear constantly from survivors, because unfortunately they reach out to us, is what they need to do. And so we started by creating a how-to guide. We created, I think, the world's first how-to guide for survivors on what to do if you want to leave your house and you want to secure your vehicle. Now it's being used by associations across the globe to build their own guidelines and teach their own people. But one thing that comes up is that people just don't know what their cars are capable of. Most consumers buy a car. They have no idea the car has telematics. They have no idea the car has an app. And the last year, the Department of Commerce issued guidelines that this is something that should be disclosed at dealerships. When you buy a car, it should be part of the documentation that you put, including the window stickers. California just passed the law modified CCPA last year. I think it's something that eventually Vermont should be considering in the future to put an obligation on dealerships and rentals that they need to tell consumers, by the way, this car can track you. And this is what you can do to stop it. Number two, I think that this disconnect by reset protocol should be mandatory. Just to be clear, this is a free idea. This is not me trying to lobby you so that my company has some advantage. This is just wrong. This is just wrong. And lastly, I am concerned that there's a clear carve out here for dealers and especially for rentals. I understand the rental car company should know where the car is to make sure that the car is not stolen. They should not allow past owners to connect to the car and forever follow anybody else that rents the car after that, when all they need to do is to remove the connection. Something that takes literally seconds. If they only wanted to, they can do this today for those 6 makes that I mentioned. Sorry, I'm very passionate about this. I deeply care. I receive calls and emails on a regular basis from survivors that are really struggling with this. And I appreciate what you're doing, and I'm happy to answer any question. Thank you.
Can you say what your second point was? I didn't quite understand that one. You said there are 3 additions to this bill that we should look at. And what was the second one?
This protocol of making this connection something that anybody can do inside the car, that's something that should be mandatory. Again, I'm concerned that I understand what there's steps in this law about what a survivor is supposed to do in order to be able to do those disconnections. This is my experience speaking with victims. If you're leaving your house and you're driving to a shelter, you don't want, you got a million things in your head. The last thing you're thinking about is, I should be filing 5 pieces of paper with my manufacturer. All you should be able to do is to follow 4 or 5 steps in the menus of your car, press OK, and know the electronic leash is gone. And I don't know why companies are not doing this. And it's been 7 years since I told them. And many manufacturers have done it. Again, kudos to them. I'm super grateful. Yesterday I was at a conference, at the largest hacking conference in the country for car hackers. And there were people from Ford that I told, look, guys, I owe you. Dinner's on me anytime you want, because you guys have started to show that it's actually possible to do something that is so simple, a few lines of code to save people's lives. And I don't know why anybody else is not doing it. And I think that it should be mandatory, because unless you tell them they have to, it looks like they're not really desiring to do so.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to start by saying I'm fully supportive of this legislation. So the questions that I'm asking are not under the guise of me not being supportive, but this is actually more a question to you, Chair, because I can't remember if this came up during the initial pass-through of this, but does this apply to, and it was actually Andrea's testimony that made me think of this, but specifically to rental car operations like Enterprise and others. And also I'm thinking like car share apps like Turo, where people could have trackers in their car for obvious safety reasons.
Yeah, I don't know if it does or not. It's been a while since I've read it.
Yeah, well,
I don't recall.
I know Ledge Council's not here. I don't remember us talking about that. I mean, and like I said, like I'm fully supportive of the bill and what it is intending to do, but I would want to make sure that we have a provision there that would accommodate rental and also car sharing.
Right, and I think I understood from Andre.
I'm not a lawyer, but I believe that 5D specifically carves them out. It says the provision of this section shall not apply to tracking system installed by the manufacturer of motor vehicle or provider of telematics equipment services installed or used by an entity renting out vehicles. So these would exclude rental companies, car sharing companies, Turos, which is really more of a marketplace that facilitates the sharing, is a little bit like Airbnb for cars, just to explain it for people who are not familiar with it. So they are explicitly carved out. That's my understanding. Again, I think it's an awesome first step, and I'm not saying that this bill must be modified today, but I think that it's something to look out for in the future.
Yep. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of wondering if there's something different that can be done with car rentals that car rental agencies should reset every time they get the car back. I don't know if that's up to us, but it's something we can explore. So I mean, with this bill, we're not obviously passing it out in the next week and a half. This was mainly to kind of understand where it is and get some input on it and do some additional work in the off session to kind of tweak the bill, given some of this initial feedback. And
Yep.
that's one thing we can definitely look at is the car share and the rentals and how to deal with that.
And is this different than the one that we spoke about with the air tags and we were talking about geofencing?
Slightly.
Slightly different than, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Ooh, what is that?
Oh, no. Oh.
Sorry, we just had
We're
our,
in technology.
yeah, we're okay.
Machines are revolting.
Yeah. Just thought we were gonna have another fire drill, but maybe, yeah, Barbara, go ahead. Are you good, Zach?
Yeah.
All right, Barbara.
So I'm curious, again, this is fantastic. I'm really excited that Representative Arsenault brought us this and have a lot of concerns about how technology has turned into another weapon for abuse and stalking. So I'm wondering, because I know that like our dishwashers are recording us and like lots of different things are recording us in our washing machines, etc. Was the purpose of this feature one that the car industry touts as this helps us to improve our products? Because I also know that in some cases people are either striking deals knowingly or not knowingly with their insurance companies, right? And they're using them to set rates or discount rates. So I'm just wondering if you can just share a little bit about what you know about why this technology was put there in the first place.
For cars specifically? Yes.
Yeah, for cars specifically.
Well, depends on who you ask, I'm sure the manufacturers will tell you this is fundamentally important for the safety of road users, even though since the introduction of this technology, we're still stuck at 40,000 deaths a year. So if that was the purpose, maybe it's not been as successful as we all hoped it was going to be. They will tell you it's important to improve their product. I think it's important for them. I don't know that it's a very noble, mission for humanity.
Right.
Most importantly, they're really trying to monetize things. I mean, what is happening today is they want to offer features that people want. I think it's okay, right, for companies to offer features. But really what they're trying to do is to turn cars into massive data collection devices and monetize it. More and more of the features of the cars are put behind paywalls, meaning that they get to extract rent from a vehicle you already paid for, by the way. They are interested in knowing who you are, what your behavior is, and physically affect your behavior in the real world. I think people need to realize a car today has really become like a browser that is monitored on every place. But instead of watching which websites you go, is which physical places you go. It has become a browser in the physical world, and companies are actively trying to figure out how to monetize it. Most manufacturers are claiming that they believe that by 2030, this is going to be worth hundreds of billions of dollars. That's what they're doing this.
And they're selling some of this data without our permission, right? In addition to people being able to.
That is correct. For instance, Senator Wyden and Senator Markey at the US Senate did a study on how much car companies were selling the data to insurance companies. I'm sure you have seen the stories on the New York Times. And that number is, I mean, I would like to ask you what you think that number is, but I'll cut to the chase here. We're really talking about dimes. It's typically somewhere between 15 and 27 cents per year per consumer. So let me be clear. You buy a new car, price sticker is $50,000. Your data is worth 20 cents, and this may affect your insurance company by hundreds of dollars.
Thank you.
So just so folks, our 10 o'clock has been postponed a little bit. So if folks have more questions for Andrea or for Annie, please go ahead. Angel.
Thank you both so much. I'm wondering if you can, so Andrea, I know you've mentioned Ford, BMW, Toyota, Lexus, think you said there are 6
Volkswagen,
Volkswagen. Okay.
Ford,
Um,
Lincoln, BMW, Toyota, Lexus, Volkswagen. Yes.
Ford Lincoln, right.
That's
Okay.
what I know of because they never tell us, but that's what we find when we test into cars.
And these are manufacturers who allow the factory reset.
So all cars have a factory reset. What these have done is to use the reset process to send a signal back to their servers and interpret it as a way to say it's time to cut access to the mobile app.
So what does that process look like in Ford for the user?
For the user, yeah. So what the user sees is that, so let's suppose that you have a Ford and you have the Ford app on your phone. If you went through the factory reset, which is a 30, 60-second thing that you need to do, it's a secret, just like for resetting your phone, right? You need to go into the settings and do a number of steps, but 30 seconds later to 60 seconds later, what you will see is that the screen goes blank, your data disappears from the car, and a few seconds later, if you log in into the app, it's going to tell you the car is not there anymore. And the reason why it's important, I really want to explain this. The way an abuser would get back into controlling the car, right? Because they could always rehook the app to the car. But that means they need to know where the car is. They just lost that ability. They need to be able to open the car. They just lost that ability. They need to be able to start the car. They just lost that ability. And so it's a very simple and very effective way to protect survivors and consumers in general. I don't know if you realize this, but so since I didn't have anything to do last year, we picked up the phone 2,000 times and we called the manufacturers about cars for sale at the big dealerships in the countries, the Lithia Auto Nations, CarMaxes, etc. And we called the manufacturer and said, hey, is there any user that is associated with this vehicle? 2/3 of the cars that have telematics for sale in this country, the manufacturer still believes they're owned by the prior owner. And 2/3 of those have active connected devices. In fact, I'm shocked that nobody in the room here does not have the experience of having sold the car and being able to pull up the app and see where it still is. I hear this all the time, all the time.
And so if a survivor were to, so I hear you saying you have to have physical access to the car. You have to be in the car to perform the reset. Is it, or
Yes.
request reset, however you want to state it. And then, so then whoever had been connected to the car would be disconnected.
Lose access.
Would
Yeah,
lose
that's
access.
correct.
And then to regain access, you would have to be physically in the car.
Yes, yes.
And
You need to
so-
rehook the car to your phone and resync it. You need to do that in the car. That's correct.
So a survivor could disconnect and then reconnect if they still have access to the car.
That's probably a 2 to 3 minute exercise. That is correct.
And so that is an alternative to, say, a process requiring.
Oh,
copious
I don't
amounts
think
of
it's I don't
paperwork
think it's
and-
the whole enchilada, just to be clear, right? So there are other accounts, right? So when you buy a car, again, the manufacturer lists you as the owner. That means typically there's a portal that you go and log into and you can get access to the information. That stuff the manufacturer will still have to do in the way that is described in the law. But what you can do as a survivor, if this protocol was in place, is that you can immediately stop being under the scope. And you can give the manufacturer those 2 or 3 days, I think they're spelled out in the law, to make the rest happen so that eventually you're fully free. But it makes the difference between being able to drive to a shelter in safety, knowing that your abuser is not going to show up there, versus you can't.
Yeah.
And since the timeline of these, the procedures in the law is not, is not ironclad. There's a period in which people need to do it, which is great. But that means it's really hard for a survivor to time this in such a way that they can leave the house without the abuser knowing that they're disconnected things. And again, this is such an important safeguard that I think is really worth considering.
So I think we're going to have to end there. And I'm sure that, if we have additional questions, we know how to track you down. And like I say, this is something we're going to take up. We're just trying to get some information to see how to further improve the bill between now and next January when we take this up again and pass it out. So we'll probably be in touch with you over the next number of months as well. So really appreciate you being available this morning.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So we'll go off live and anybody who wants